I had taken my time to set up my hunting camp on early October in preparation for deer season. On October 4th, 2017, I had heard a strange howling outside of my trailer. It sounded like a wolf howl, except much larger. I thought it might be from a larger alpha male, so I looked out the window out of curiosity, and what I saw truly scared me. It looked to me like a large coyote walking around on two legs, baring its teeth as it walked and paced around the trailer. Then, it did something that made my blood run cold. It quickly jumped into the woodline where I could not see it. Puzzled and afraid, I quickly looked around to see where it had gone, and not even a split second later, it charged out of the woods and smacked right into the travel trailer. It knocked me off my bench, and I fell back, dazed. This thing possessed superhuman strength and nearly toppled over my trailer. I felt like a semi-truck ran into us. I jumped up to grab my gun, but the only thing I had near me was my loaded 12 gauge, and it was ready to go. I picked it up, cocked it, and I was ready to go all Arnold Schwarzenegger on this thing. I kicked the door open, and I had the shotgun up on my shoulder, ready to fire. I didn't see it anywhere. The woods around me were silent. It was eerie. It was like being in a horror movie where you know something bad is about to happen. I slowly scanned my surroundings and crept around the trailer to see if I can find it. I was gonna fill it full of slugs. I made it all the way around the trailer, 360 degrees, scanning every nook and cranny, but I never saw anything. Nothing. No tracks, no eye shine. The spot that it impacted right where I was looking out the window, there was nothing. No footprints, no dents in the trailer even, and even though it felt like I got hit by a car. But this awful stench lingered in the air. It smelled like blood and rotting meat. And that's when I started to question if I'm just hallucinating or I'm going crazy. And that's when I heard this nasty, god-awful howl, growl, scream that came from close by in the woods. I ran back in the trailer and decided I would just be better off holding up in there. And if this thing decided to break in, it's going to meet its end with a couple of slug shells. Safe to say I didn't sleep that night, and I promptly moved to a different area the very next morning. I was only 15 years old at the time. I'm 27 now. At the time, I was going to high school like any other normal teenager, and back beyond our house was this huge area that was fenced off. The fencing was tall, wooden fences, and I believe the neighbor or someone or something owned it, but to my knowledge, it was just an empty field. Beyond that was woods, and then I think it went to another neighborhood a ways after that. This fence went right up against my backyard, and then paralleled the entire sidewalk all the way down a couple of blocks. On the other side of this fence was this giant field that we would sometimes hop to get across the neighborhood, and then on the other side of that field was a totally different neighborhood. If you hopped the fence to the left, you would be in the woods. In front of you would be the next neighborhood, and to the right of you would be our neighborhood. My friends and I only hopped this fence a couple of times, but there was really nothing back there. It did look shady though, like I'm sure people bought drugs back there or did heroin. I did actually see some trash and a homeless person's tent back there once. Who knows? But this was in the wintertime, and every morning when my father would drive me and my sister to school, we would hear these horrible noises and screams that sounded like they were on the other side of the fence. My sister and I would always hear it, and it creeped her and I out. My dad was in denial about it, but it was clear as day, and it was every winter morning. It was loud, and I was not the only one in the neighborhood to hear it. It wasn't until around my senior year of high school that I befriended one of the neighbors on the far side of our neighborhood, who also just happened to be a registered hunter. One day, we got on the topic somehow of the noise I had heard a few years back, and he confirmed that there was indeed a strange creature that he had seen living back there, and that I was not crazy. He said this thing was tall, black, had pointy ears, and resembled a wolf. It nearly tried to break down the fence and get into his house until he fired a couple shots a few years ago. He hasn't seen much of it in the last year, but it still comes around from time to time. He believes whatever this animal was migrates through the area through the wintertime. There's times that he has heard scratching on the fence, like somebody pressing and dragging a bunch of knives onto the fence board early in the morning, the same time in the morning that I had heard the howls years ago. It's very strange. After I graduated, I moved off to college and moved the heck out of Dodge, and now live states away with a new life, new career, and new girlfriend. Luckily, I don't have to deal with any of that now. My wife and I just this last fall were on our way, driving up to British Columbia from Oklahoma and our small motorhome. We were making our way along the highway at nighttime when a large black dog stepped out and crossed the road quickly. This large dog was walking erect on two legs, and I would estimate the height at over 8 to 9 feet tall. It had very thick fur and had tall pointed ears. Because of the darkness, it was hard to get a total estimation of its features, but it did have amber glowing eyes that seemed to glow unnaturally. When your headlights hit an animal and they have that eye glow, this animal had that, but without even having any headlights in its eyes. It quickly crossed the road and then looked over at us mid-stride. Then it was gone, across to the other side of the road. It happened so fast and so close, I was afraid we were going to hit it. There was no other traffic present at this time, and no really spot to pull over. It scared my wife more than it scared me, but I still get the chills just thinking about it and describing it to you. It was 1999, and I was driving east of Charleston, Missouri. I was driving later on at night, and I had pulled over to put some water in my coolant tank. Quick note, I had been having some serious issues with that truck that I was driving at the time because it was overheating. For whatever reason, I had neglected to get the proper coolant for it, so I would literally be carrying around jugs of water with me and stopping every 10 or so miles to be pouring it in there just to keep the engine from overheating. Dumb, I know. So this was one of my routine pullovers to the side of the road to quickly put some water into the coolant. My engine was really hot, so I think I was trying to let my truck cool down because it was starting to get really hot, and the engine was nearing smoking. I lifted up the hood and poured in the water, and sat there and waited. I thought that while I'd give the engine a minute to cool down, I would take this opportune moment to have a cigarette break. As I'm lighting my cigarette, I hear this high-pitched, long, drawn-out echoing sound. Then I begin to make it out as a howl of some sort. This makes my skin crawl, and I begin to feel on edge. I try to brush it off and finish my cigarette, but this eerie feeling crept over me. Out of the corner of my eye, as my eyes began adjusting to the darkness, I can make out the outline of a figure standing upright across the road, just beyond the trees a bit. It was very tall, taller than me, I'm sure. As I can make out the outline more and more, it resembled that of a dog, or so I thought, but the ears were very long and pointed, and the body seemed very broad, like a bodybuilder. It began moving and swaying side to side, as if trying to get a better look at me. That's the vibe I got. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I was seriously getting creeped out. I remember thinking, well, that's enough for me. I threw my cigarette down, stomped on it, closed my hood, and jumped back in my truck. I wasn't going to wait around another second. I got out of there and just got to a nearby gas station and finally bought some coolant. I don't know what kind of animal I was dealing with that night, or why I felt those feelings, but I do know that because of that situation, it's taught me to really be prepared. In my case, it means not being neglectful and making sure your vehicle has plenty of coolant, which I stocked up on, and quit being lazy about. A few years ago, I went out with a couple of my buddies to do some bass fishing at night. I'm not going to tell you where, because I don't want anybody to listen to this and to think they're brave and to go try and find this thing. Nobody should try and find what we saw. It needs to be left and forgotten about. What we saw came straight out of a nightmare. When we were fishing, we began hearing a loud crashing sound coming off far to the left of the woods, when my friend shined the spotlight right in the spot that we heard the noise coming from. And lo and behold, this monstrosity is standing there. A creature with the height of around 8 feet tall and covered in dark brown to black hair at the very edge of the tree line, fully lit up by the spotlight. It had its large hand on the side of the tree and was watching us menacingly. This thing looked like a flipping werewolf out of the movie The Howling. It looked evil. It gave us a scowl, or at least that's what the expression on its face resembled. Then it stepped out of the tree line and began walking towards us. My friend, who was already screaming and panicking after seeing it when he shined the light on it, was now screaming and running, leaving behind everything, as we were all leaving our equipment behind. The creature behind us started to pick up the pace and began grunting and letting out a panting noise, as if to let us know it was giving chase. We made it back to the main trail and then back to our truck in one piece, and it seemed that this creature had stopped following us somewhere along the way. We were terrified. One of us had to go back the following morning to retrieve our equipment, which was left untouched. Still, one of the scariest things I've ever been through in my life.